Hello students, welcome back to Studi.Live. Today in the chapter Breathing and Exchange of Gases, we'll be learning about the disorders related to the respiratory system. Well student, you must have heard or observed in your surrounding, there are some people who are not able to respire properly or they find it difficult in some or the other scenario for breathing. Right student? So how will you define the disorder of respiratory system? Let us quickly define. When a person is finding difficulties in breathing, it is called as disorders of the respiratory system. Now, this difficulty should not be a short term, it should be a long term difficulty. Long term difficulty. For example, while climbing up on the mountain, we find it little difficult to breathe because the oxygen keeps on decreasing as we move from the lower atmosphere region to the highest atmosphere region. So that will be not called as a disorder. So that's why I've mentioned long-term difficulties leads to the disorder of the respiratory system. So let us understand some of the disorders of the respiratory system. Now student, the one very important disorder that you all have observed is a common one, asthma. Am I right? Very importantly and very commonly you must have heard this word asthma. Then we talk about the next, that is emphysema. Then the third disorder is called as ORD. ORD stands for occupational respiratory disorder. Now student, these are the some of the disorder that I have listed. You must have come across more than this, but these are the some of the commonest disorders. The asthma, what happens in the asthma? The person is finding difficult for the breathing. So, difficulty in breathing. They are finding this difficult, especially in times of when they are in stress. When they are in stress, they are finding it difficult to breathe and they start hunting for their asthma pumps. So they basically give us extra oxygen and they help them to easily respire. So this is one of the common disorder that you come across. But what happens exactly in the asthma? There is inflammation in bronchi as well as in bronchioles. Bronchi and bronchioles. I hope you all know what is bronchi and bronchiole, student. Still, I'll just put it across. This is the respiratory tract, that is the trachea, which is getting divided into two parts, student. This is called as the bronchus. This part is called as bronchus. And when this is further divided into many different branches, they are all called as bronchioles. Am I right, student? So, when we have finding inflammation during this region, that means basically the main passage, basically main way for the passage of the oxygen as well as carbon dioxide. So, there is inflammation in the bronchi and bronchioles which leads to the formation of difficulty in breathing. Hence, it is reduced the airflow too. Reduced airflow flow. Why reduce, student? Because there is already inflammation during this passageway in the way. Therefore, the air flow is reduced, and that leads to the formation of difficult or disorder of the respiratory system. Now, let us understand what is emphysema. Students, when I am talking about the diffusion, when I am talking about the diffusion of gases. So, where exactly the diffusion of the gases takes place, student? Exactly, you are right, alveoli. In the alveoli it is taking place. Supposing this is my alveoli, which is surrounded by the blood capillaries. This is my alveoli, which is surrounded by the blood capillaries. Okay, student. So, what happens exactly in emphysema? There is gradual distraction of the alveoli or the wall of alveoli. Gradual destruction of the walls of alveoli. Now, student, when you know that the diffusion is going to take place in the alveoli, that means the exchange of the gases, that oxygen is, carbon dioxide is getting exchanged with oxygen, right? Basically the purification process, it is happening in the alveoli, and if the alveoli keeps on destructing, will it be possible to respire properly? No, not at all. So that disease is called as emphysema, and the main cause of this is smoking. Smoking is the main cause of the emphysema, that is gradual destruction of the wall of alveoli, and this leads to the reduced or reduction in diffusion. Diffusion of what? Diffusion of gases. Diffusion of which gases I'm talking about? I'm talking about the oxygen and carbon dioxide. So did you understood, student? This is the second major disorder where due to the gradual destruction of the alveoli because of the smoking, what happens? Diffusion of the gases is minimized or reduced, which leads to the formation or disturbance in the respiratory system. Then let's talk about the third and a very common disorder, that is occupational respiratory disorder. Now this is, as the name suggests, occupational. That means what? Occupation means whatever work you perform, right? So this is the important word over here, occupational. That means according to work. So the work that we do, mostly the work like stone breaking, grinding. What happened in all these procedures, student? All these sort of work, what happens? What is going to happen in all these procedures? The process which is going to happen, that means in grinding or in stone breaking, what happens? The small particles that gathered around, and those small particles when entered in the respiratory tract, what happens? Exactly, they trap inside the respiratory tract, and it is not possible for it to come out from the same. That's why the occupations decides the respiratory disorder. Hence, we need to be very careful when we are talking about the occupation that we are going to do. And the long-term exposure to these work may leads to pulmonary fibrosis. Pulmonary fibrosis is again a sort of disorder in the lungs, and this can also damage the lungs. This can also damage the lungs. So student, this sort of work that you do, and also in different things, different possibilities, you all need to be careful that it should not harm the respiratory tract, so that you can stay away or a step ahead to keep yourself safe from the respiratory system. So these are the some of the disorder that I have listed below, and I hope you will be more careful after knowing that this can lead to damage in your lungs. And a very important point is over here is smoking, because the children in young generation today are finding it as a fashion. So you need to be careful what are you doing. You should not harm yourself. So student, that's all about this concept. I hope you've got the clarity. To get more clarities in your concept, stay tuned with Studi.Live. Thank you.